All right. This public input session is called to order. Tina Meunier, it is off.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Wimberly, board members, and Dr. Robbins. Tonight is our public hearing on our FY25 budget. Doesn't look like a lot of public are here to enjoy it, but maybe online. Maybe they're live streaming it to watch for us. We are presenting basically what we presented to County Council. So y'all have already seen it. We just wanted to go over it officially as this is our public hearing. We advertised for this evening in the newspaper so that everybody knows that we are adopting our FY25 budget. So Dr. Robbins was going to start off for us, and then I will come back to visit with y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Meunier. Ms. Sizzler and I have all sat down and put a lot of time and effort, hopefully, to make this as understandable as possible. I'm going to treat this like you haven't heard it before, like it's your first time from the aspect of people who may be watching this online that haven't heard this presentation. So first slide, the board's budget priorities. You basically have three priorities. That's to recruit teachers and staff, retain teachers and staff, and support student achievement. They're not in priority levels, but those are your three overarching priorities that drove this year's budget and really drive most of your budgets. Next slide. So our enrollment forecast went back to 2012 to look at what our historical enrollment was. Back in 2012, we had about 22,000 students. We grew rather slowly but steadily up until 2020. You all know what happened in 2020, and as was typical across the country, we saw a decline in enrollment as a lot of families kept their children in the virtual environment. But then when we came out of 2020 into 2022, we surpassed our pre-COVID numbers. And then this year, we had forecasted that we would be at 26,380 students. So roughly a 4,200 student growth in the last 10 years. But last count, we had hit 26,894 students. So over 500 student increase in what we were even forecasting. We're forecasted right now to grow at minimum 700 to 1,000 students every year for the next 8 years out to 2032, which would put us at 37,000 students in the year 2032. That is an extreme possibility, and I've been told that that number may actually be a little low, and that's coming from people who are building in the community and the number of homes that are being constructed. The reason we use that enrollment forecast as part of the budget process is because 82 to 84, I think actually we're up to 88% of our general fund budget is salaries and benefits for employees in our district. So as our student numbers grow, therefore the number of employees that we employ in our district has to grow to meet their needs. This slide gives you a historical look at where we are from a teacher salary comparison. Again, we do know we're one of the lowest funded school districts in the state of South Carolina, and really this is a demonstration of where we take a little and try to do a lot with it. I chose the three counties that are closest to us here in the Low Country in our size, and then a county that is real, or a school district that's real comparable to us in the Midlands. You can see we're not at the very bottom, but in most categories, we are the lower paying school district in the Low Country. That's going to come into play here further on when we start talking about the amount of money that we're investing and proposing that you invest in next year's budget to try to bring us in line with our competitors, because recruiting and retention has become a real serious challenge for a lot of school districts across our state. So on this slide, you will see the budget draft. We have our expenditure descriptions. The first three are mandates. So for example, the teacher step is a mandate. We have a salary schedule that we use. It's adopted by the state of South Carolina, and then we adopt ours in comparison with that. The state's salary schedule is a minimum salary schedule. We try to go above and beyond, as do a lot of districts in the state, to recruit and therefore retain teachers. The mandate next year on top of the salary or the step increase is a $3,500 increase to all sales of the teacher salary schedule. So the first two together, the first is a cost of $1.89 million. To add $3,500 to each step of our salary schedule is another $8.1 million. We also have mandates of an increase of 11.8% in health insurance, and that will cost our district roughly $2.4 million. So right there alone with the mandates, we're at about $12 million in increases for our district. Those are the mandates. Then the additional salary-related expenses, and this is where I'm most proud of what our board has always taken the challenge to do, and that's stretch a little a long way, and that's to add $2,000 to every step of the teacher salary schedule. So the minimum starting salary would be $47,000. We propose $49,000. That's an additional increase of $4.6 million. We also propose that we extend the salary schedule from 28 to 30 years. That would cost us an additional $241,000. From the admin salary, and I'll just pause there for a second. So right there in our budget, you're looking at around $16 million that we're proposing investing in our teachers, whether they're new teachers coming to our district or teachers that are already in our district. I think that's huge. It's a historical raise and increase to the teacher salary schedule that this district has never seen. In the next additional salary-related review was the admin salary schedule. That would be a proposed increase of around $721,000. Again, it just depends on, as administrators retire or promote and new administrators come in, that would vary back and forth, but it would be associated with a new salary schedule based on the salary study that we utilized to set these scales. We also looked at the extracurricular and co-curricular activity salary schedule. Again, I've shared with our board in the past that a lot of times we put money into the regular salary schedule and then we forget about these club sponsors and coaches and people that do a lot of additional duties within our district. So what we did this year, if you recall in your budget binder, we indexed everything to a first-year teacher's salary, so that proportionately, every time we raise the salary schedule, it will raise those club stipends and sponsors as well. And so that will cost us around $667,000. That's really kind of a small expense if you consider the number of clubs and sponsors and coaches we have across, a 25-building school district. Finally, we never, and again, I applaud our board for this, we never leave out our classified staff. I remind people that we have 4,000 roughly on any given day, 4,112 full and part-time employees in our district. This year, of those employees, 1,842 are teachers. The remaining are our support staff and our classified staff. So we're proposing investing $1.2 million in the non-teacher step and another $1.2 million, so an additional 2% into an increase for those employees as well, for a total investment of $2.4 million. So the total expenditure request in our budget is to increase our budget by a little over $21 million. And I'll pause there if you have any questions. If not, I will turn it over to Ms. Sisler and Ms. Meunier.
Thank you, Dr. Robbins. You did great. We tried to lobby him to continue, but he said, y'all can talk. Y'all can talk. So the next slide is where we are showing our projected revenue summary and our projected expense summary. So Dr. Robbins went through a few of the expenditures. Wanted to make sure that y'all understood where our revenue was coming from. So our local revenue for this current year, we are projecting at $78.4 million. That includes property taxes and fee in lieu of taxes from the county of $74 million. We also have interest on our investments. We have been very grateful that the interest rate has been so high. I'm not sure how long that will keep going, but we have seen year over year that we earn about $2 million in our interest income, so we're hoping that that'll hold true for next year, and that is included in our budget. We also have miscellaneous local revenues for some fees that we are allowed to charge and other miscellaneous items. Last year, just as reference, our local revenues were at $67 million. So this is an increase of $11.4 million over last year's local revenues. Our projected state revenues for this coming year are $180,000. Last year we had projected $169 in our budget, so that's an increase of 10.7. Our state aid to classrooms money, this is based on House Ways and Means numbers. The state has not completed their budget. It's been from the House Ways and Means to the Senate Finance. The conference committee has not completed their work, and they aren't intending to come back until June. That's why it's always hard for us to actually adopt a budget until June, but we feel like this is pretty solid. These are the numbers that came from House Ways and Means. Senate Finance was a tad higher, and they have to come somewhere in between. Unless they want to give us more money, we would be thrilled with that. So our additional revenues that we are projecting from the state is $10.7 million. Next is our federal revenues of $100,000 that we get from impacted aid. And then transfers in, it looks like a really high number. The majority of that is $24.6 million that comes from the state, which is our state aid to classrooms from the EIA portion of the state budget. The other portion that's shown under the state column itself is in the state's general fund. So they split it into two different pots. So that's considered a special revenue fund, which is transferred into the general fund. Then in order for us to have a balanced budget, we are projecting and requesting to use $4.6 million of our fund balance. We'll talk about fund balance and how we're able to utilize those funds in just a few slides. For our budgeted expenditures, we always start with our last year's expenditures of what was budgeted, and then we look at how our expenditures actually came in, if we were high in some areas, low in some areas. So last year we started with, you'll see the number $266 million over on the right-hand side. Some of the expenditures that we were able to back out of that starting number is $1.8 million of one-time expenditures that we used in this current year that will not repeat, such as y'all allowed us to buy some new financial and personnel software, and also another large item that came out of that was the transportation shelter for the bus drivers. So that is a savings, so that's why that's shown on the other side of the column. And then our proposed expenditures for 25 for our state mandated expenditures, which Dr. Robin explained about the STEP and the teacher increase. Those are at 12.4. And then our local required expenditures that we've been through line item by line item are at 15.7. Then we were able to determine some other reduction of expenditures for this new year, where we're able to save some monies. So the total of the revenues and the expenditures are both $288,748,486 for last year. For FY25. So as we were talking about the fund balance, the use of fund balance for next year to help us to be in balance. The GFOA recommends that you have 16.67% of your current budget so that you can have that as cash reserves. That's 2 months worth. So in the event that you're not able to get any of your state money, because currently the state provides us 74% of our revenues, and the county and local provides 26%. Usually the split is 70-30, and we just haven't made it there yet with county. but we're getting there. So for our fund balance, we have projected that we will be at 19.9% of next year's expenditures, which is higher than the board goal of the 18%. So that's why we feel comfortable proposing to use that $4.6 million towards expenditures for next year to balance the budget. This slide represents the local revenue and how we get money for our operations from local property taxes. So the assessed value that's shown there for FY25 was the amount that we received from the county as the assessed value that we can collect operating millage. So that's on non-owner occupied property. It's not any homeowners. So no one in here pays property taxes towards school operations. So the non-owner occupied property value times our millage rate of 183.6 generated for us this current year $71.1 million. If you look year over year, if we are using an estimated 3% growth in assessment, which we have been told is very conservative, but just for presentation purposes, you can see that over next year we would receive another 2.1 million, and then the next year is 2.2 million. So we're growing a little bit and a little bit along the way from our assessed values. That's without even increasing taxes whatsoever. So this slide represents our operating millage history. So right in the middle where you see 183.6, that's where we have been since 2020. We were able to get an increase the year before, but we haven't increased since then. We were at 173.6, oh, pardon me, it was in FY18. So when we receive a letter from the Board of Economic Advisors from the state every year that provides us with our growth in population for our district, as well as the consumer price index for inflation, that's the same number across the entire state, but then each district has a different growth percentage. So when you take the growth percentage for this year, it was 7.12. If you take that percentage times our operating millage, you can see what we would be limited to for our increase in millage. So back in 2020, we could go up based on our CPI and population growth by 6 mills. But we didn't ask for that, so we didn't increase our millage. So you'll see the column that says allowable millage lost. So you're able to ask for what your current year limit is, and you can go back 3 years. That's in state statute that you can ask for a look back of your millage. So for the past 3 years plus this current year, that just indicates how many mills we could have requested. We could have asked for 5 mills, then 10.8 mills, 18.8, and then this current year 13.4. But we did not ask for a millage rate increase for this year. We just wanted to bring that to your attention. So that was our brief presentation, but open for any and all questions.
Well, and before you even get to that, since we're ending on the millage piece, so I think one of the things for us is to maintain a very good relationship with our county and to have a good vision of what our assessed value increases are, because that's what generates revenue, and how we're impacted by the growth in the number of employees that we need and the raises that we'll have to continue to provide to stay within the 18% goal that the board has. Right now, I felt very comfortable in meeting with our finance team and talking to the county in proposing such a healthy increase, similar to what we did last year, quite honestly, and not ask for a millage increase. And again, I go back to, if you all heard me talk at the county council meeting, it's because we're in a community where our gross AV is growing. If we were in a community where our property values and our AV was declining, it would be a completely different scenario for us to be able to survive. But right now, this year, we are still in a good place for us to be able to do what we're doing and make these recommendations.
So we don't have any public input. I don't see.
I
any-
actually have a question.
Okay.
Can you go back to the budget draft page? The second page, second budget draft? I was just trying to do the math, and I'm not doing a very good job. Okay, so I understand what the state mandated expenditures are. What about the local required expenditures? Shouldn't those two numbers together, state mandated expenditures and local required expenditures, equal the total on the slide before?
No, ma'am, those
Am I
are
missing
just
something?
the
Okay.
salaries and benefits that we were focused on for presenting the
I
salaries
see,
and
so that's
benefits.
only salaries and benefits on that page. That's not including other local required. Okay, thank you, because I knew I was missing something. Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we could do you know the percentage of the total increase from last year to this year? I mean, it's just a simple division of
Percentage of
what
the
last year's budget was and this year's budget. Oh, 20, 21, yeah. Yeah, no, she
No,
just wanted
that's
the
just
number.
salaries and benefits. That's not the total.
The total increase of our budget.
21 million is salaries, but then we have additional
Right. We have additional for operations. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the total additional?
It's the difference between, I should know this off the top of my head, the 284 minus it's $22 million.
Yeah.
I can't.
If we're, no.
What was last year's budget?
Last year's budget was $262,057,000.
Okay, so subtract that from 288, 748. That gives you the increase in the budget.
I used 284. My apologies. Yes, we
Yeah.
need another 4.
Yeah. No.
That comes up to 26 million.
Yes,
Yeah.
26.
Yeah.
I had taken out the amount for the fund balance, the 4.6.
And of that, almost
Yeah.
22 is salaries.
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you're saying.
I guess I had a question about, what do you anticipate the fund balance percentage to be after we take out the 4 million plus? I know it's still early, but what do you anticipate it to be? And then probably follow up is, how much do you think you can get it back up to this time next year?
No, actually, we'll still be above our 18%. Yeah.
But what percentage would it be? Yeah,
19.9.
19.9, okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that's taking out the 4.6 that we are asking to use for FY25. That would be 19.9%.
Now, I would also share, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but we use, just like our financial advisor, I feel like I'm always looking at it this way. We used a very conservative growth number. We used, and Mr. Nurick used 3% when we forecast out for our referendum. For example, I believe, we were talking today, it was about 7.4% was what our growth was. And if you historically go back the last few years, it's been anywhere as low as 5, but up to 12% in terms of our growth. So the 3% is probably significantly low, but better to be conservative to make sure that we generate the revenue we need so that we don't have to cut because we shortfalled ourselves.
So 19.9 is like the minimum we all see our fund balance at. Likely we'll see more
Yes.
than that.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a question. I just had a comment, and I just wanted to highlight these things and ensure I'm right. So I know I've gotten some messages about some articles around neighboring counties making reductions, and I just want to say on record, Dorchester District 2 was the first district to propose making these cuts, and as you can see in our proposed budget, that is to the tune of a little over $4 million. So yay, Dorchester District 2. In addition to that, the 5,500 increase to each teacher step, which is awesome. And if I'm not reading this, correct me if I'm wrong, 4% to the non-teacher step. So I just wanted to highlight those things and on record share and emphasize that it's a 4 million reduction, a little over 4 million reduction, 5,500 increase to each teacher step, and a 4% increase to all the non-teacher steps.
There's one other thing that I will add in there because it was a board goal and we were able to accomplish that, and that's a permanent longevity stipend for employees who've been in the district for 0 to 10 years, 11 to 20 years, and 21 years and above. And so obviously that has a cost associated with it as well. And we're continuing to do the signing bonus of $2,000 and $3,000 for new employees coming to DD2.
And I forgot the extracurricular being increased, so.
And all that being said, we would still be at the 19.9% of next year's. You may hear some chatter from the state. The legislators are talking about how high fund balances are for school districts. Over the past few years, we've been able to save some money in our general fund because we've had the ESSER monies, which we are going to talk about that next. So we are utilizing some of our savings that we have recognized in next year's budget, but we will still be at the 19.9% of next year's amount. They use current year as their amount, so it might look like we have 24%. You'll say, Tina, you said we'd have 19.9. We're calculating it on what our FY25 expenditures will be, because that's the budget that we're working within, and we need to have that much in cash reserves for next year. So we think about it progressively.
And I don't want to be redundant. I know you all have heard this, but again, the government accounting recommendation is 16.67% at minimum. It's 2 months of operating cash. And I always use this as an example of why having that cash is important, and that's because you just never know what's going to happen. You know, I was talking again to the finance team today, and I shared, you know, my experience with the tornado that wiped out one of our high schools in 2020, followed by a pandemic, and we had to spend our cash reserves to be able to survive. And I was reminded that here we had a hurricane that was very detrimental, and so if you don't have that cash, then what you have to do is you have to take out bond anticipation notes and pay interest on them. You have to borrow money to spend money to receive money. So this puts us in at least a safe place, but not an exorbitant amount of money in our cash reserves. And so again, that's why the board set the 18% threshold. And again, depending on the volatility of our assessed values, it will generate more or less revenue in any given year. So I think you all are in great position in terms of where we are cash-wise.
Okay, great. So I think I kind of opened up the box a little bit for the ESSER discussion. So if we're done with this public hearing, anybody else have anything for the public hearing? Okay. So great. So now we are going to talk about the ESSER 3 funds that we still have available. We discussed, Ms. Powell, she's not listening. Okay, you do have a copy? Y'all have hard copies there. So for our spending report that we have here for our ESSER 3, we are showing our cumulative balances through March 31st of 2024. That was the latest claiming period that we sent information to the State Department. So we have a little bit of money left in some of our buckets. These are state-defined buckets that we are proposing to move to other buckets. And the reason we have to have public discussion on this, y'all are the public today, is because we're moving it out of one significant bucket into another. So at the biggest change that I wanted to point out is in bucket number, and the state calls them buckets, so I'm not making this up, but bucket number 13 is improving indoor air quality in school facilities. We had originally proposed to do HVAC replacements and upgrades to schools listed as critical from our facility study, and those included Span and Knightsville. So at the time that we received original quotes for that, it was going to be $6.9 million. So that was 3 years ago when we submitted our first plan and our first set of quotes. Well, it's been a few years. It was 2 years when we went out for bid. It came in much higher than that, so we had to modify the plan of what we were going to do for those schools. So those schools will actually only cost $4.9 million, which leaves us a difference between the 6.9 and the 4.9, so $1.9 million. And so because that's from improving air quality bucket, we felt that that was a significant change. The State Department requires us to have public discussion on that item. So what, excuse me, what we are proposing to do with those funds in an amendment is to capture those dollars in other areas. And the biggest area that we are going to use these dollars for is for our instructional technology. So whenever we submitted our first plan back 3 years ago, this grant ended on September 30th, 2024. So we couldn't have any expenditures past that date. Recently, maybe December timeframe, the State Department said you're allowed to use ESSER funds for one more year of instructional technology that will get you through one more school year. So because the grant ends 9/30/24, if we purchase instructional technology that'll get us through June 30th of 2025, that's allowable now where it wasn't in the past. So we would like to use those dollars in other ways with those instructional technology items. The cells that I have highlighted are where we have a few other dollars that we're projecting that we won't spend. I'm gonna start at the bottom, the $86,000 last year when y'all approved for us to do retention bonuses out of ESSER. We had budgeted just a little bit too high, so we can use those savings there. The $17,000 was the original projection when we calculated the emergency paid sick leave, and then also for the UAPs that were paid out of this bucket. That's just a little small amount there. And then, of course, the HVAC. And then we had budgeted for after-school tutoring materials that we will probably have a small amount left over. Same for our summer school. And then our social workers, we weren't able to hire them until later in this ESSER 3 period. So we'll have a little bit of savings there as well. So where you see the highlighted items, those will cover where you see the negative items, if that makes sense. Dr. Robbins, is there anything I need to add on that?
I guess the one thing is, much like all of ESSER, the monies we were able to spend shielded our general fund for the last 3-4 years, and so this gives us one more year. These expenses are already expenses we have. They would just be paid out of general fund, so allows us to liquidate ESSER 3, and I think everybody that I talk to will be happy to not mention ESSER 3 ever again.
Yeah, will you clarify, I had the same question, when you said into the negative areas, where is that?
So so bucket 8, where it says to purchase of educational technology, we adjusted our projections to show that we would end up spending $2.1 million there, but the carryover budget that we had for this year was only 1.3. So we would use $781,000. So we would just move part of this, part of the orange highlights.
So the numbers that are in parentheses are negative.
Right.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
Sorry, that's an accounting thing, sorry. I should have
Okay.
explained
Yeah.
it a little bit
No, that's okay.
more.
I just didn't know that that
So
represented
we'll
a
do an
negative.
amendment with the highlighted ones into those other areas where there are negatives. There will be no negatives. They'll all be zeroed out. We'll spend every last dollar.
And then when you were talking about the instructional technology, so that's not a new thing. That's nothing new. That's just paying for something that we already are planning to use.
Yes, like Dr. Robbins
And
said,
have
we
already
would have
been
had to
using.
pay for it out of
Right.
capital technology or general fund technology. But since we have this bucket of money that we're allowed to, one more year, that's helpful.
Right. Okay. Okay.
I mean, so isn't this essentially going to take off, and maybe I'm just asking ignorant question because my brain's not working, but isn't this essentially going to take away $2+ million from our general fund current expenditures that we're projected to spend then? If we're moving this into these areas, like, is this money that we were, or no, it's just ESSER money you're moving around to spend for?
Yes.
I mean, you said this is stuff
yeah.
we were already purchasing, so I'm just wondering if this frees up more money in the general fund.
It doesn't. I mean, it kind of does. It's really a
That
gray
is-
area because we weren't going to be able to spend this. It was supposed to be completely liquidated. They allowed us to do it, so we're able to stretch some of it now. The technology, instructional technology, yes, it's going to save us from spending that out of those two budgetary items that we have. But this was, all along, this was money that we had, that was a part of the plan, I'm assuming back in 2020, that we just didn't have expectations of line items in the general fund. It was protecting the general fund. So back to your question, yes, technically it should save.
Well,
It
then-
should save.
Well, we took that into consideration when we were doing the FY25 general fund budget. We took this into consideration.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
I was just like, in my mind, wondering if that would free up more money to potentially do a second round of like a small retention bonus or something. If we
think-
paid some of it out of there before, would that be a possibility to utilize some of those funds in that rather than?
I don't know if, I don't think we could do that. I mean, and honestly, we don't know. It's a little bit of I wouldn't call it a gamble, but a shot in the dark on knowing exactly how much that retention bonus is going to be, because not
Like
100%,
250
yeah, not
instead of
100% of our employees are going to sign, that contract to return. So, I mean,
We estimated it for our current
We
budget.
estimated
Yeah, I
it's about
mean-
$2.3 million, but we took these into consideration
Yeah.
for the general fund since we were told that we would be able to utilize this one more time. We're just bringing this amendment
Right.
out for public discussion now that we have gotten the quotes and we know exactly what it is for next year.
yeah, and I guess the other thing I would say is, if we end up in a much better position next year than we think we were going to end up, then I would say we could definitely revisit, what the retention stipends are. But right as it stands right now, putting a considerable amount of money into salaries and stipends, and I would be uncomfortable to go too much higher than what we're doing to see how this flushes out. Because the other thing is we're in a little bit of a volatile, I think, period on knowing how many people we need to try to hire based on the growth of our student body. So that doesn't always catch up with you right away. So a lot of this is based on the size of your district, but the state's not going to be forward thinking on this. We could see a decline a little bit as we see our state revenues start to increase based on our growth indexes as well. So again, I feel like we've been really aggressive with what we're doing right now. To go above and beyond even more, I would be uncomfortable personally.
Are we at? Are we voting on changing this tonight? Or is this just being brought to us for the public?
Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't require board action. It was for public discussion. I don't think we have to have official action on it. We didn't do it. Unless the public wants to speak.
Well, and I just want to make sure Ms. Powell's down there, and I didn't want to have a sidebar conversation. We're in the negative in some of these areas because we liquidated what the original ESSER 3 plan was set as. These were always going to be expenses for us. So we overexpended, and what they would do is then be paid, the remainder would be paid out of those two funds we mentioned to you when it comes to the educational instructional technology piece. So these aren't like new expenses or created expenses. They're expenses that we are able to pay for with the ESSER 3 funds. And again, you'll hear a lot of people across the state and the country talk about the funding cliff. And so tough decisions had to be made on, do you maintain some of these programs and some of these services being provided? And I think you saw back where, like, for example, the health room assistants, we actually received a grant from the state to help support that initiative. But that money and those positions were all initially funded out of our ESSER dollars. They didn't exist before the pandemic. Same thing with our mental health support services. So again, that's how you end up in the negative, because we were always going to have the service. We just tried to pay for as much of it out of our ESSER plan as we could. Yeah, yeah.
Because once you add up all those negatives, there's really not that much left.
So the negatives will be washed out with the positives. It's a zero overall. I'm going to use some of the additional, that 1.9 million, we're going to.
So there's a little bit left, or no?
It washes all the way out. It zeroes out. But we'll do an amendment to request the state to move from bucket 13, the $1.9 million, and we'll move some of it to bucket 8.
To bucket 8. Oh, I see.
Move some of it to cover bucket 11.
Oh.
So that all of those, I'm sorry, it's an accounting spreadsheet. I should have done it a little differently. Dr. Robbins will probably give me a hard time tomorrow.
Okay.
My apologies. This is the way I presented it last time. I'm sorry.
I told you guys those.
So is this to pay for things that have already happened or things that are going to happen?
That will happen.
That will
So
happen. But
we've
you're
included
just
in the projected column, the projections for 4/1/24 through 9/30/24. We'll be paying for those software continuations before 9/30/24, and they'll carry us through June 30th.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Should have done a little different presentation to show the reallocation.
One last reminder is, remember, this is a spend reimburse program. So we spend it, and then we have to send our invoices to the state to be reimbursed.
Up. We appreciate you being here, so we don't feel as though we're talking to ourselves. I mean, it could be.
We will submit the amendment to the state and let them know that we had public discussion on this, that y'all are in agreement with this. So thank y'all very much.
Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions or comments or anything else for the good of the Finance Committee? All right. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.